what you're doing for someone through your product or your service must enrich them. It must make them money, must save them money, must give them joy. It must, whatever your product's promise is, or service, it must fulfill that. That to me is a huge takeaway, because everything else we talked about was a downstream or upstream component of that. That's what I think people need to understand.
Welcome back, guys, on ROCK SEO YouTube channel. Today we're here with Bill, and we're going to go deep into some SEO topics. We'll talk about AEO, GEO, SEO, HIO, and all those things related to that. Apologies for my rough voice today, but that's what it is today. So welcome on the show, and let's get started.
Good to see you again, Rocky.
Bill Hunt is a global growth strategist and one of the original pioneers of SEO. A former US Marine, he's worked with Fortune 100 companies to turn complex digital ecosystems into scalable growth engines, generating billions in revenue along the way. He's built and sold multiple search agencies, spoken at conferences in 33 countries, and co-authored one of the foundational books on enterprise search marketing. He's also the author of The KPI Trap, focus on how misaligned metrics impact performance. Today, Bill helps global brands untangle complex websites, fix broken strategies, and rebuild them into systems that actually drive real business outcome. Beyond business, Bill is a world traveler, having visited 110 countries, and an avid underwater photographer who continues to be inspired by global cultures and ocean creatures. Welcome on ROCK SEO, Bill.
Thanks for having me.
It's been a while that we last connected. I think it was from an event in Milan where we met in person last. Was that right?
That's correct.
Yeah, that was an SMX event, which was brilliant. And I came to the realization that you were in the Marines. So completely different career. Perhaps we can start with that.
Yeah, I actually spent 10 years in the Marine Corps. And it was one of those things, like many people that didn't have money to go to college. I thought, let me do this. And the plan was to go into the Marine Corps, have them pay for law school, become a military lawyer, and get out and make the big bucks. And along the way, life happens. I met my amazing wife, and then there was the Gulf War, and being gone for 16 months with 2 kids at home, I decided that that the Marine Corps really wasn't the best place if you have a family. So I got out. Went to school on my own, and while I was doing that, I started a company called Quake Gear. We lived in Los Angeles, in California, and it's sort of the epicenter, if you will, of earthquakes. So, in my day job, while I was going to school, we had an incident where we were trapped in our building during the riots, and I was fine. I pulled out my survival kit, and I had food, and I had water, I had all kinds of good stuff. And the CEO of the company said, "Hey, I want everybody to have these." And it's how people are. They're like, they'll pay for convenience. Can you make these for me? And that's really what I found, was that there was a lacking. So 10 years in the Marine Corps, multiple, sort of survival schools. I said, I can make these. And long story short, I did. I created a website. Before they were even websites, it was really a site in a store called Nifty Serve, which was in Japan, in sort of like, I think maybe people don't even know what AOL was, but like a gated community, and then did create a proper actual web page even before we had browsers, and was found by NHK, which is Japanese public TV. And I had all these tips in Japanese. And again, long story short, they found my website, they found my products, they mentioned it on TV, and a couple big, chain stores contacted me and through the web. And I actually wrote about that in my business school thesis on how to use the internet to reach overseas markets. And so law school was sort of, one of these things I gave up on. I gave up on a PhD because not every, but many Fortune 100 companies were knocking on my door, because here in 1994, this guy used this crazy thing called the internet to crack one of the most difficult markets to enter in the world, Japan. So they're like, how the hell did you do this? And I'm like, well, I use this thing called the internet. And we got found and built an agency, that focused primarily on Japan, but we built websites. We did search marketing even before it had a name. Uh, and the rest is history. We built this company, and that's where my enterprise experience, because this was when proper companies, billion-dollar companies, were trying to figure out this thing called the web, and how do we get found? And this is when Yahoo came into the equation with Alta Vista. Then later we had the Google. And yeah, it's just been a pretty interesting ride since then. And you talk about evolution, and how we went from no internet to the internet to where people were doing things on the internet. And then Google came along, changed the whole dynamics of everything. Then paid search came along, changed everything. And now I think we have another evolution with AI, and not just AI within the Google ecosystem, but within the entire ecosystem, as a whole.
I think we have to mention, and by the way, this is one of the first SEO focused conversations here. And for who doesn't know me, I have a background in SEO from a while, but I've not talked about these things. Good to go back though. So I think the main thing is that you cracked a code which was basically unknown at the time, and you found a system that worked. Because effectively, since the early days, which I know you came before my time in online in general, it was still, what is the system, what we can do about it. What was at the early days? I mean, these are fascinating topics, but how easy or not easy was it back then?
It was insanely easy, but I think it was also complex, because there was a few people early days, like, my sort of nemesis was Greg Bozer. Because he was one that was working in a similar vertical that and it was easy, but it was also crazy. I mean, you could go in back in the old days, and you could add, 5 additional occurrences of a word on a page. You might be able to slightly adjust a title tag, but literally add 5 occurrences or 10, and then, you could even hide it, in white text on a white background. And you could come in, we didn't have a way to have it reset, but if you had a reasonably informational website, they'd come back the next day, and then you would see, you'd move up, and then your competitor would see that, and then next thing you know, they're adding 10 occurrences. And then we had pages that had, 50,000 occurrences of a word. It was 3 paragraphs, but you could scroll for like days, because all of this, text in white text or whatever your background was. And so, the engine started getting hip to this, that people were gaming it. And I think, the interesting thing is they were, you, they had a utility, a function. And I think this is the same, naiveness that we have with AI today, which, if you think about it, how the hell can we game some of the AI stuff today when we've already seen the problems, with search and search engines, right? Because a lot of the people that are working at these companies have been poached. They just didn't poach the right people, So we see now a gimmick that's probably seen its end of days, was people would create a listicle, So you would say, okay, here's the top 10 founder podcasts to listen to, and you put that in the footer on your website, and of course, your podcast is going to be number one, and then you'd have the others. And then next thing you know, somebody would say, hey, what are the best founder podcasts? And then, the ROCK SEO podcast would be listed number one in ChatGPT or Perplexity. And then, the others would be in it, but there'd be some others thrown in that maybe you didn't have on your list. And so, you'd go out and show people, hey, I got you or me to, in there. And so, they were already done away with this for the most part, right? And I think that's it. And that's exactly what we did. We found how to push the envelope. And if we talk about one of the things that's different, back in the old days, when we had to go to the internet cafe to get online, and we had to walk uphill barefoot in snow, the whole thing, how we laugh at our grandparents, how life was so hard. But we didn't have the tools. So we had to experiment. And I think that's one of the things I think that's been lost is there's so much information. There's so many help guides. And ChatGPT now you can go and say, hey, how do I do this? And I find there's not enough people experimenting. And the interesting thing in the geo AI SEO space, there's a lot of people that are experimenting, and they seem to be some of the more popular, people that are out there because they're trying things. And I think that's what I would say to anybody is try stuff. Like you said, try to crack the code and that's sort of what we did. And you have to see what sticks. I mean, when I first started, I never really got in the business to be a search marketer. I was selling disaster preparedness consulting and earthquake kits, and when there's not an earthquake or a natural disaster, people don't want this stuff. They'd have no top of mind thought. So I'm like, how do I augment this? And because I had people finding me out of a need, and I tell you, one of the biggest days of my career happened when a lady called me from the company doesn't exist anymore. They've been bought multiple times over, and wanted my catalog, but was very interested in one of our big industrial size kits that had, axes and pry bars and stuff. And I asked her, like every business owner should, how did you find out about me? I said, oh, I found you in Yahoo. I had no idea what Yahoo was. And I'm like, oh, Yahoo's been very good to us. Yeah, thanks. And so what did I do? Oh, well, I went and did a search. What is Yahoo? And I found out it was this directory in the Bay Area in San Francisco. And Jerry Yang and Dave Philo were actually putting things that they had found on there, and they put me on there. And so we got one of our biggest orders in terms of enterprise or big companies for this hardware stuff, because we were put in Yahoo. And I'm like, how many other people could use this? And so what I would do is my wife was in import export, and they had this big like library of books of who made what. And every day, when we weren't at peak season, I would take a book off the shelf, lay it, spine on the desk, let it fall open. Might be industrial batteries. And then I would go to Yahoo and see who wasn't listed there for industrial batteries. And I would literally send a letter. This is before we had email, right? I would send a letter and I'd print out a copy of Yahoo industrial batteries page and say, you're not here. And I'd say for $10, $50, $100, different pricing, I can get you in there. And the thing was, it was free, but nobody would take the time to fill out the form to submit it. And then, I became a top submitter. And so much that Jerry Yang said, hey, put this, and I was telling people I can get you in 24 hours. And as it started to get popular, he said, put your email address in this, or put Yahoo in parentheses after your email, and our system will bring you up and we'll get your people in first. And, and then the very first search marketing conference in San Francisco, somebody else that he told that to went and said, here's the tip of the conference. Put, Yahoo in parentheses after your email address, and that will escalate it. Well, it ruined it for everybody, right? So that great magical tip, the insider thing that we had, but that's literally how, it sort of began. And then again, seeing my own website and seeing other people, how we could change things. And then Danny Sullivan wrote his brilliant article, which he just republished the other day, of what he saw as a reporter. And then, other curious people started getting involved. And that was about the same time that websites expanded. So I think we're seeing a similar sort of renaissance, if you will, of websites. But at the same time, think of all the marketing that was sort of devastated, phone books. For the young people, we used to have to find a business. We would have this big, thick book and there was all kinds of tricks for advertising, putting in, start your name with A, or put 4 A's or 5 A's and 6 A's, and all the things that people started doing with title tags and stuff like that, right? And I think so that was done, and I've heard multiple people now start to talk about, do we need websites anymore? With agentic, our feed's going to be the way, and I think people are still going to want websites. We still want to be able to communicate deeper than what a feed can provide. But I mean, we went through this with Facebook. I mean, I had clients around the world, like in Taiwan. Um, I remember speaking at an event there, and we were talking about optimizing websites, and people were like, we don't need that because we got rid of our website because everything is Facebook,
You're selling Facebook, yeah.
right? And so they said Facebook is our face for our company. I'm like, but you can't say that. You can post every day, but you don't have like a permanent residence. And so I think we're going to go through a similar time. And I think, and the one thing I think this is going to be a question you're probably going to ask me is, I'd say the vast majority of what you do or we're doing should do from an SEO perspective is equally equivalent on the geo or whatever acronym we're up to these days, because I actually wrote a fairly lengthy document and I did it to debunk this whole argument that don't think about SEO, think about geo, and to say how much of it is the same, illustrate specifically what's different. And it's frightening how much is the same. And I'll say this and I'll pause for a minute. I had a company that it brought me in as an advisor because I'm fairly neutral on this, the whole geo hype thing. I'm sort of a neutralist, if you will. I neither hype it nor dumb it down. I think it's here. I think companies need to think about it. And so um, when I was explaining this, they said, this is the geo recommendation document I got. And he said, I want to know what you feel about it. And I read it. And I said, so what did you think when you got this? He goes, it's really SEO with a different label because it's everything that my SEO team, actual in-house team, was telling me to do, but they just sort of relabeled stuff and then told me to do all this, spend $100,000 on, Reddit seeding and, getting into this and trying and doing PR because I needed citations. And he goes, but it was basically SEO with a different name. Not quite that simple, but, it's what he thought as a CEO of a company.
When you founded the first company, and you were into the trenches, so to say, with all the implementation, realizing how things work, but then you eventually founded a company, and I guess things are different. This is something I ask also my other guests. What, in your opinion, is the biggest difference between, once you effectively are involved into something, when you're running a business which has to deliver on other objectives and KPIs? Then we can go back on the GEO later.
The first thing I realized is how much work I have to spend on the business, right? And I think that's the hardest thing for founders. You have this brilliant idea, you have this brilliant tool, and we're seeing this now with hundreds of geo tools that people are spinning out. We had hundreds,
Or
if not
anything,
thousands, anything, whatever it is, right? You have an idea for a new way to grow grass, right? I don't care what it is, it's the same problem, right? The first thing you have to think about is how everybody tells you to do a minimum viable product, whatever it may be, and see if somebody will pay for it. Almost every business evolves from a perceived need. The number one thing I think you learn very quickly, both as a founder on your inside and outside, is where does revenue come from? Right? And so we're out there trying to hustle and sell to generate revenue for ourselves. And the first thing I think we forget is, how does our solution generate revenue for the other people? So one of the things I've been doing a lot of is helping businesses, this growth side of it. I've had people, especially on the software and search side, say, hey, I'm really struggling with my business. Can you come in and help me? And I ask for 5 things. Number one, let me see your financials. I want to see where you're making money, where you're not making money. Number two, I want to see your, what do they call them? Timesheets. How are you tracking people's time? Because if you're a consultant, the only thing you have to sell is time. You're selling your knowledge, but that's finite with that, it was like Brocco was saying, the quality of life. A proper worker in America has 10,080 hours, 1,080 hours they can sell in a year if you want a 40-hour work week, right? So what do you sell that for $50 or do you sell that for $500? And the delta between a $50 an hour or even a $25 an hour or a $500 or 500 euro an hour, the expectation is exponential. If I'm going to pay you 500 euro an hour, I want, and the rule that I always found was I need to recover at least 2 to 5 times that in economic value. All right. And I think that's really it. And is in this idea of economic value is one I learned by education, being an economist, and is that choice people make, you make, or a customer makes. Do I spend money on this or something else? Whichever one is going to either save me the most money or make me the most money. That's it. It's that finite. And we forget that. And so, no matter what you do, everything you need to think of is, are we doing that? And the first thing you find out when you're a struggling company, let's just keep it to companies, is you're probably failing on that point. Because if somebody cancels, that means the economic value, the reason that they brought you in to begin with, either A, doesn't materialize, or they found something that's doing something better, or the third one is the friction. How much they actually have to do to get benefit out of you. And I find this with software companies a lot, where they try to shift a lot of the, whether it's onboarding or the actual workloading, off to the client, right? So the client buys this solution because they think it's somewhat automated, and then find out that they're probably spending maybe a third or sometimes 5 times more time using somebody else's solution than if they'd either built their own or integrated it in. So you always got to add value. Now, the last thing I want to add to that point is the client should always be top of mind of your value. If they're not top of mind, meaning if you're not getting compliments, thank you for the amount of time you saved me, thank you for the amount of revenue you drove for me. If you're not hearing that, and if they're not legitimately grateful for what you've done for them, and you have to tell them in a report what you did, you're not winning. That's the silent quitting, if you will, from a client. And I wrote this article. I've been trying to capture these epiphanies from my career, right? What were things that radically changed my thinking? And one of these was this idea of, contribution value beats contract value. When somebody signs up for you, you give them a contract and a scope of work that says, I'm going to either, you're going to buy this widget, or I'm going to do these things. And we as business owners, we want to deliver that list of things. But what the client's expecting is that list of things or that product is going to, materially change their business. And those are the things you learn. And so, as your workload shifts from, doing the cool coding or, going to the cool sales meeting or pontificating on some brilliance on a podcast, and you come back and your inbox is full of, documents that you have to read or invoices you have to do or decisions you have to make because your own employees say, I need a new license of this software, or I think we should change our servers, or I think that we need to use, this new widget because of tariffs making this widget from China more expensive. Um, that's the unsexy part of business, but it's the critical piece that we have to think out. And I think that's where a lot of people go wrong is they don't respect that. And I tell anybody starting a business, there's two things you must have and you must spend money on. Number one, a good account, not a good accountant, but a great accountant.
Yeah, number one.
Your books need to be pristine. They need to be easy for you to understand not only, your run rate, how much money you're spending, how much it costs to run your business, how much money you're making in, especially if you're not getting paid up front. That lead time. And the bigger company you work with, the more lead time they want. They want more, we used to be able to get 30. We have companies now that are on like these net 90 plus there's a name, I forget the name for it, plus this name.
I didn't know you have these long ones as well.
Yeah, many are 90
Wow.
and trying to push it. And then on top of that, you have to have the invoice in by say the 14th of the month, because if it comes in on the 15th or 16th, you wait until a whole nother cycle. So you may have as many as 120 days. And if you wait, now if you have a cycle and the other thing clients are putting in now are deliverables. So you can't get paid you can't even invoice until certain deliverables. And so you've got this deliverable that you deliver after 3 months, then they've got 90 days, but then you sent it on the 17th. So that's another 30-ish days. So you might be 6 months, 9 months later, you're getting paid. And it's interesting. I hear a lot of people say, I get prepaid. Yeah, you're working with small companies that will prepay you. A big company is not going to prepay you. I'm one of those elitist, SEOs that can demand a lot of things. It's very rare. And especially the other interesting thing is always find out discretionary dollar levels, because that's an amount a manager can spend without having to go through a lot of hoops. That might be 50,000, it might be 5,000, and you can structure the first part of your project that way to get the discretionary dollars. Anyways, those are what I would do. The second one is a good lawyer. Make sure you've got contracts, because if you go to get bought, now having been bought multiple times and through my role in WPP, the first time I got bought was during the dot-com boom. We actually bought 22 companies, but I evaluated over 300 around the world. We knocked 95% of them out of consideration because when we looked at their financials, they were not just unprofitable, they were unworkable. And it was interesting how many companies couldn't even give us financials. An interesting thing was media companies, paid advertising companies were saying, we're a $1 billion agency. No, you're not. You had $1 billion of throughput. You got to touch that money before it went to, Meta, or before it went to Google, or before it went to, the New York Times, but you took a percentage off of that. And then, so that's your revenue piece, right? And so a good accountant, a good lawyer will help you get that in order, because the first thing that's going to happen when you want to get bought, they're going to look at all that. And they're going to look at longevity of clients. And so again, it circles back to that. Are your clients happy? There's a very interesting question they ask every client. Are you happy? Are you going to renew at the same level or less? And the more people that say they can't give a raving response to that, the value of that part of your portfolio gets devalued. So it all circles back. Are you delivering value to your customers? Are they happy? Are you removing friction? And that's what it's all about. And the better you do that, the better it is.
Thank you, Bill, for this very lengthy but super informative question on the business side. I think many people don't consider the full picture, when they think, oh, I like to do this bit, let's found a company because I want to do more of it. So they want to scale, but then they don't consider all the different bits. What you said earlier about payment terms, that's one thing which effectively someone has to consider. Like, if you're a consultant or you're a company, can you live with those terms? Do they work for you and your team? Because I'll tell you, for example, for my small consulting situation here, 120 days is tough, no? But if the contract justifies, perhaps I will consider that. But normally, one has to make choices. Does it work for you? Does it not work for you? What do you want to achieve, effectively? Where you want to be? And then the other two things you mentioned, an accountant and a lawyer, 100%. A funny little side story. So we just relocated from Croatia. We're in Czech Republic now. But in Croatia was extremely difficult finding a really good accountant. And when I had to set up there my company, we went through two, which were really bad. So I was about to give up. Then my wife came up with another one from another smaller town. And then I talked to them. They were extremely good. I had them now 3 years. And they help a lot on number of things when the law regulations difficult in another language, when it's not English as well, another spanner in the works. And they make really your life easier there. So that's fully agree on that. Now I found another one here, and there's always something I would say is number one, top of mind, and a lawyer as well. Super important. Maybe more complex cases, because I know you had to work on some very complex clients. I think you told me in Milan about IKEA, if I remember. There was something or another brand similar, maybe home appliances, or maybe I'm wrong. And I remember you were describing me. I know it was for the Hreflang, which was one of the tools you built. What was the biggest challenge on Hreflang, and why did you start that one?
We started Hreflang Builder. That was the name of the product that we called it, because we saw, and anybody that's, I'd say, outside of the US, they've lived this problem, right? Americans, we got it good on the internet thing, right? We don't have these border problems because we're a big country. So the problem was this cross-market cannibalization. So give you an example with, say, German or French, languages that are spoken in multiple markets. So a company will create, a France website in French and maybe one in Morocco and maybe for the French-speaking part of Switzerland. Well, Switzerland's a perfect example, right? So you've got French, you've got German, English, a little bit of Italian. You've got some Swiss native, and so a company in Switzerland may have 4 versions of their website. And so the problem is that maybe someone in France does a query looking for the French website, and Google found the Switzerland French version and showed it. We see this a lot with English and Australia and the UK, where in Australia, a UK site may show up, the US site may show up. And so a user clicks the link in Google, goes there, may not notice they're on the US because Australian has a dollar symbol and US has a dollar symbol. The price may look a little high or a little low, depending on your perspective. And then you get ready to check out and it says, oh, shipping is, $800 from the US to Australia. Like, I didn't know I was shopping in the US. Because you thought you were, at Nike or IKEA or whoever in Australia. And so this is a real problem. So our companies, we were dealing with enterprise, some were anywhere from $4 to $15 million of cannibalization a month that they could legitimately show. So a user would come, the usual symbol was, user would go to a checkout, have stuff in the basket, and then abandon, and they would ask them, and it's like shipping was too high. If it was the same currency, they would it was too high, too low, but it was the shipping that usually got them. And so this was the business problem. So we built, and then I actually pitched Hreflang to Google 8 years before they rolled it out, because we had this problem at IBM. Well, all big companies had it, where the Argentina website outranked every other Spanish market. And why? Because on the country locator, Argentina was the first Spanish language with an A.
The letter, what you mentioned earlier with the yellow pages stuff. Yeah.
So the letter, right? Google found Argentina, and then when finally got to Uruguay or Venezuela, it already had these Spanish pages. So I don't need these. It's the same thing is what I already have. So Uruguay, Venezuela, Chile, Spain, nobody else could get seen other than Argentina. And so we explained this problem to Google. It's your problem, Google, and your problem, Yahoo, because that you're treating it as duplication. We want to tell you this is our Uruguay, our Chile, our Spanish website. And they're like, yeah, cool. And finally, they deployed this where we could literally say, this version, this page is for Spain, for Spanish. This is for Chile. This is for Argentina. And so we built this tool because you think about it's unlikely, despite them being organized companies, that any two market websites would be the same. So the complexity comes with trying to match this page for this blue widget to the Argentina page for the blue widget that has many differences. So we built this tool. We were using it. I went to a conference and I used an example from 3 or 4 of these clients on how much money we recovered. Millions of dollars. Now, this was in an international search session. And so 22 people came up to me after that session. Bill, can we use this tool? Can we license this tool? And I'm thinking, it doesn't look good. We didn't build it for external consumption. Like, please, 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 please. So I'm like, okay, there's a market, 22 people begging you to use your tool. I gave 22 people, we created, really quickly, we put up a gate where people could log in. It would separate your projects from my projects. And I sent logins to all 22 people. Only one person ever logged in. So what was hype in that moment? They thought they couldn't live without this. When it came time to actually doing it, and when they had access to the beta, to free use it, to test it, they didn't do it. The one person did, ended up becoming one of our biggest clients because he was an agency, had multiple clients. And so where we ran into problems with companies and why we offered it as a service is we could just do it without having a lot of the meetings. We would have growth managers was our biggest customer because a growth manager will cut through the noise and just say, look, I got to grow, make it so. And when they would tell us, make it happen, we could make it happen because we built it with XML sitemaps, which is a file you can tell Google to fetch as opposed to adding it to the website. By doing that, we could do it without asking any market for permission. So your specific question about what are the challenges? The moment, think of the United Nations. The moment you have a meeting and you bring up an issue, it could be something about let's reduce famine in the world. Feeding people is the most fundamental thing we should all agree on. But how we feed people is a different story. How we're going to pay for it. Where is the money going to come from? What do I have to do to feed these people? When you start introducing those questions, it becomes a complex problem to something everybody knows needs to be done. And this one company in particular, the council they assembled to solve Hreflang, which I had already solved for them. We had a tool, it was ready to push the button to deploy these files, it was solved. For them to decide to pay us or to use my method to do this, they had an 83-person council. So you know why when you do a project, you don't open it to everyone. You have a sub-team and then a sub-team, because then you can get things done and you bring the final decision to people. When you open anything to more than 5 or 10 people, nothing moves forward. So one of these, a different company was losing about $4.5 million a month. And finally, after 16 months, so you can do the math, it's a lot of money that they lost. They finally said, okay, I think we're going to go your route. Because it was all of these battles. Are we going to build it internally? The agency that they had said they have a bespoke model, which was basically people in India with Excel worksheets. Or we could use my tool that we could deploy relatively quickly. But it took 16 months for them to decide, okay, we're going to use his tool, but we're still going to build our own, which is fine. Let's fix let's stop as much of the leakage as we can today. And these are the problems we have with anything. And so I'm going to pivot into, maybe you have this question, but one way to short circuit this is I tell people, figure out who is going to win and who is going to lose in every one of these decisions. Who would lose? Well, IT would lose some control because now they have to use a third-party solution. They're going to lose some budget because maybe they wanted to build this cool widget. Agencies probably going to lose because they were hoping they could do this as a project incremental revenue. So they're going to be against it because it's not their solution. Then you're going to have markets that may lose say on how it's done, right? So if you can think about who are all the people who are going to lose, like any product, here's the reality of the world. Some of the best products that will materially change anything, your life, your business, are often killed, literally taken out of the bought to be eliminated because the incumbent doesn't want to lose market share, right? So you really have to be aware of who you're taking money from, who whether that's money or power or clout or whatever it is. If you can understand that, you can start thinking, okay, how do I get this person to show this is a benefit to them, right? And who is that person that owns that stream? Who is the person whose KPI? This was the whole idea of KPI trap. But the catalyst for it was I was seeing people, another classic example, there was an article from Oreo cookies. Oreo cookies parent, Mondelez, said AI bots are ripping through our website. They're taking all of our intellectual property. There's a phenomenon in search now where if you do a search in Google, you can get if you want to know what's the best Oreo cookie recipe or a recipe with Oreo cookies, it's not going to take you to Oreo necessarily. It's going to give you some recipes in the AI overview. So this is called zero click, meaning people are getting an answer without having to click your website. So this freaked everybody out. So companies are saying, we're going to stop these horrible bots from stealing our recipes and presenting them for free. So Oreo blocked these bots. Then Oreo, I'm going to pick on Oreo because everybody's doing this, but they just told everybody about it. The head of digital, they, like everybody else, did a report of how we're appearing in AI.
Parenthesis. When you say about this, perfect example, but this is nothing new, but because we are in sort of in the field here, because when it was still the zero-click answers, it was already the same. But I think now this has been hyped because of AI as well.
A lot of this is coming from people selling the tools that need this. There's an interesting discussion in search right now about the whole origin, as you joked at the beginning, all the acronyms. The GEO, that actually was created by Mark Andreessen's company because they were investing in the tools that were either helping you create content for AI or tools that would tell you if you were showing up in AI. Now, here's the interesting thing. Oreo and the whole Mondelez, the parent company, did a test to see how are we showing up in AI results. 90% of the time they weren't showing up, right? But here's the irony. Because they didn't want AI to steal their content, to show it to people and not get a click for it, not get traffic, they blocked them.
Yeah, but if they were not showing up in 90% of the cases, it was not that big of a deal, right, to begin with.
They were only there 10%.
Yeah, but that's what so they make a fuss out of 10% in a way.
Right, because they weren't there 90%. So I've tried to flip it because they say, well, we were only there 10%. Yes, you were there 10%, but that means you weren't there 90%. So they panicked. We got to fix this. Then they had a consultant come in and say, you're blocking these guys. So you've got a sale, but yet you sort of have a bouncer at the door. You've offered this to everybody, but you have a bouncer that only people with the secret decoder ring can get in. And the irony is they're paying millions of dollars for advertising, And they're also paying influencers to take that same content and put it out on the wild. So these are the things when we have teams that aren't talking to each other, that we do things like that. And this is the big problem with that we encounter is we have one group of people with a KPI to reduce server load. So they block search engines or they block AI bots. And then another team's like, we have a KPI to increase traffic. And then we have another team that's trying to increase, mentions. And so all of these KPIs fight each other.
Earlier on, you mentioned on the Hreflang that it was making someone uncomfortable or something like that, or it was about Google. And when you explained to me what the tool did, I think it was that one in Milan. I was telling you that's great. Why this is not more successful, because you told me about the struggles of selling it and what you mentioned just now. But I think also when there's a solution which effectively is better than others, the other companies, they don't want to give up their market position, right? Because when it's large e-com websites, that was a no-brainer to structure with the sitemap, etc., with your tool. So then I thought, okay, maybe someone doesn't like that to happen. And connected to that hype, you mentioned your 22, I think it was earlier interested clients for the Hreflang. I think there's the same hype kinda about the AI stuff nowadays, right? Where we mentioned earlier, there's tools for everything. Yet, companies have been testing and playing around with things. What is one common misconception these days, in your opinion, on this?
I think the biggest one is everybody still equates it to search to some degree, like prompts. AI, we use prompts, right? We're not putting in a keyword, we're putting in more longer sentence. I think the average prompt is 26 words.
I call them conversational searches.
In Google, we might say, I want small business accounting software. With AI, we're going to have literally the conversation. What is the best software for a company with 5 employees with offices in multiple countries? That's a conversation. That's what you would ask a consultant, right? So if you unpack that, there's multiple dimensions. Now, the way you would ask that question is different than how I would ask that question. And one of the reasons that Google gave for not giving us prompts like they give us, like some of the queries, is there's no 2 prompts that are the same. So we're getting back to the misconception. If you and I and 5 other guests you have, would not ask the same question, why do we expect that a single iteration of that question would be sufficient? Now, the thing is, and if you ask the question now and you ask it in 2 hours, you're going to often get 2 different responses. That's the biggest misconception, because the way these systems work, there's called trained data. And that works well on things that are fixed facts, like, what's the capital of Italy, right? So that's a fact. We know what it is. Now, if we say, what is the population of something, that's still a fact, but it may be different. Or, what is a favorite food? What should I eat in Prague? It's subjective. Now, if I put best in front of that, things go nuts, because the first thing that these tools have to do is define best. Literally define best in your context. In order to do that, it sets up a criteria. Like Google would just simply, okay, these group of people wrote a blog post, said this is the best food to eat in Prague, and boom, you sort it out. You individual searcher. AI is saying, okay, what is best? Now, what I know about Bill may like, more proper restaurant. They may, or do they want fast food, or what is best for an American tourist? What is best for a European tourist? What is best? What is best? And then it will deduce a criteria, and then it will fetch in real time things that try to satisfy that criteria. And so that is, in my opinion, very hard to try to replicate in these tools. Now, it's great. It gives you directional things. And what I tell companies is, let's do it for critical stuff. Like, does Absolute Vodka have gluten? That's a binary yes or no answer, right? And so is the answer that comes back, does this company sell this? What is the address of this company? Things where there are things that we should take responsibility for answering. We want to make sure the answer is correct. Those are things that I think people should look for. More obscure stuff is very hard to do. So that's a big thing to think about. The one thing I want to say for anybody listening, any business owner, do your magic query. What is let's say you make the best staplers, the new stapler. And the coolest new stapler is actually from Japan that doesn't use staples. It does a magic origami fold that binds paper together, right? Okay, so we got one of those. And let's say you don't show up. The coolest thing about AI is our next question, we can do two questions. Number one, how did you determine the best stapler? And it will tell you the criteria. Then the next question, and maybe this was your second question, why didn't Bill's super new cool stapler show up on your list? And guess what? It's going to tell you. This is why you didn't show up, Bill, because guess what? People are thinking of old school staplers that uses staples and binds paper. Yours is doesn't do that. So it didn't meet consensus. So I tell everybody, ask why you didn't show up on the list, and it's going to tell you. And then say, wow, okay, I don't have that. And if you've got something new, because consensus is expecting the products that everybody's talked about, then you have to have that. You have to have something that says why your non-staple stapler is a stapler, right? You have to put it in context of what is known. And I think this is a hard thing for a lot of people with new stuff because, I've been told by marketers, literally told by Cisco when they launched their new Star Trek grade video conferencing, that we couldn't use the phrases video conferencing. Telepresence, that was the name of it. The brand agency said, you can't use video conferencing because this is light years beyond video conferencing. Then how do I find it if I don't know the secret decoder ring phrase for this? Anyways, those are the things I think we often forget about as business owners. We're so proud of our product that we think everybody will have to have it. And that's, to answer your question about Hreflang Builder, every single company, every multinational should be using it. Half of them didn't know they had a problem, which is why they weren't using it. The other half had a bureaucracy problem. Either the website was too complicated and they didn't want to hear about the complication, or there were stakeholders that would lose something if they did this or be embarrassed by that, the chaos and dysfunction of their website. That's why everybody didn't run to our door and buy it. And we had to educate people of the very problem that they had. And it was interesting how many companies never knew they had a cannibalization problem.
Changing topics slightly, you participated to so many conferences. Is there something that you particularly enjoy about conferences? Do you think they, bring people together, or you take joy, they give you energy? What about your conference experience?
Those are the two things, right? I get legitimate joy and happiness by seeing people learn something or take away something that I've told them that they may not have been known about, and be able to apply it. That's the biggest thing when I come back to a conference and I see someone, especially 5 years later, and they say, Bill, I had this recently with co-optimization where we were combining paid search data and organic data. He goes, I heard you present that at a conference in 2005. And I couldn't do it at my current company, but then I went later and I did it. And I got promoted to VP. And now I'm senior vice. I run all digital for this big company. I would have never got that had I not learned about co-optimization. That's the biggest joy you can get when somebody said something you told me to do helped me in my job. And that's number one. Number two, the energy of for me, going to a conference and getting the nugget, that one piece that I can extrapolate into something else. That's what I like about it. And then I get happiness when I get to speak with smart people. And we get to have a dialogue face to face where they tell me something they're doing, I tell them something I'm doing, and you can merge those two ideas. That's what I like about it. I don't like when it's a lot of hype. I don't like when people are, when you have a salesperson who's never done the thing that they're talking about. I like it when it's a real practitioner that's up there saying, this is what I did. Because when you ask them a question, they can answer it. That's what I like to get from it. And I especially like speaking internationally, not only because I get to travel before or after, but you're exposed to something new. Not everything is the same. And that's one of the frustrating things about conferences in the US is they're very American centric. And when you come and you're sort of the token international search person, and when you get, like, I literally spoke at a conference a year and a half ago, and there was 3 people in my session, and 2 of them were people who did what I do, and 1 was a friend of mine. Right? Nobody else came because they didn't understand the implications. But then you talk to them at the conference later, and you're like, "Oh my God, I didn't know I had this problem. Oh, I didn't know that how easy it would be to reach Australians because they speak English, or that translating or localizing my website into Portuguese, I can reach people not only in Portugal, but potentially in Brazil." Those are the things that I like is again helping people, and that's why I do it. I like it. It's a lot of work to speak at a conference. 99% of them don't pay you. The trade-off is you get exposure for what you present. So, 8 to 30 minutes, if you're lucky, is probably a day or two's worth of work, plus the expense to get there. So that's why people sell, for those that don't know, because, there's a lot of effort went into it, and then they want to maximize that airtime that they have.
Is there any chance to go to a conference and not hear about AI these days?
There's not. I don't care where you go. You can go to a farming conference, and they're going to be talking about. There's no conference that doesn't have AI being talked about.
There's still a lot of talk these days about work-life balance. It's always top of mind for a lot of people and companies. And of course, with the introduction of AI, there are some, improvements in efficiencies. But can they really help you achieve a better work-life balance, in your opinion?
I'm going to say yes with a caveat. Yes, they can when used properly, but it shouldn't take you 14 hours. Now if you're saving 20 minutes or 30 minutes or an hour a day as the output of those 14 hours of writing Claude skills and stuff like that, yes, go ahead and do it. Also, be very, very careful that you review what this is doing, because I'm seeing so many people now, they'll do an audit, they'll do a strategy for someone, and it's full of erroneous stuff, which causes you a lot of problem. It saved me, I'd say probably maybe 5 to 10 hours, not necessarily a day, it depends on the day, by having AI do things for me. But I also find myself doing more things with AI that I probably wouldn't have done.
You have the experience, because that's what I always tell also others, that yeah, we can also do a strategy faster, and then you can go quickly and say, okay, correct, no, this is wrong, fix this, and then ship it in 2 hours. Whereas if you wrote it, it took 10 hours, but because you have the experience. So this I want to connect also for young people. This can be a big challenge because they think they can do everything with it in a flash, right?
And how much can be wrong, right? It's very interesting when you ask Google things, or Gemini, right? Gemini is owned by Alphabet, which has access to all of the Google stuff. It's very interesting when you ask it SEO or geo search optimization things. It will often, what's called hallucination, it will give you answers that may not be correct, but if you don't know, you will think they're correct. This is Gemini, right? Google's own thing will tell you to do things. And when you have to know enough to potentially challenge it, to say, I don't know about that. Like, oh, you're right. Like going back to Hreflang, when I've asked it questions about Hreflang, really to write articles or stuff, it tells me, oh, make sure you set the country in Google Search Console. That's been gone for 3 years. And this is Gemini telling you to do it. So imagine giving that to a client and the client goes to log in to do this and it's not possible. So that's where experience comes in. Double check it, take an output, put it in another AI and say, does this anything in here not legit? Right? So my depends about work-life balance. It's less about can AI do it? And I think work-life balance comes down to what Brocco was talking about. It's about you. You have to want that work-life balance. You have to draw the line in the sand. Many of us get in a trap, which I was in, that I felt if I worked hard and I built my company and grew my company, that I would have the financial stability to give my family more. And I used to travel so much. I'd be home maybe on the weekends. I would fly 300 to 400,000 miles a year. At the end of the year, we would take all my points, hotel points, airline miles. We'd fly business class to wherever my kids wanted to go, anywhere in the world, and we'd spend the whole Christmas break there, and then plan the next one. I thought I was doing good. Now my kids are adults. They're like, well, we wouldn't necessarily, trade a trip to Australia or scuba diving, in Galapagos, but we would have liked to have had dad home more during the year, right? So you have to make those choices. So AI can't do that for you. Yes, it will enable you, but work-life balance comes from you actively making a decision. The pictures you're going to show in the intro are going to show the bigger me. I'm down, 130 pounds, 55 kilograms. I made that decision after a heart attack. I had to make that decision. My doctor said, look, dude, if you want to live, you got to do this. So I had to make a decision. Do I continue this multi-million-dollar consulting business, or do I find a balance? Make less money, maybe make similar amount of money, but charge more, find fewer clients that are willing to pay more, but get healthy, be healthy, right? And that's the decision that I made. It was sort of forced upon me, but I could have been like most people and said, no, I'm going to keep doing it. So it is a choice, but use AI, intelligently verify it, find what is taking your time and where you can take your knowledge, your proper knowledge that you can be compensated for, how to improve your products, how to improve your offer. Use AI to help you with that, and get some of the busy work done, and allows you to spend more time on what you can actually bill for or improve your product to sell it for more.
Okay, one last question before we wrap up. I said it already, but it's so exciting topics here. What's next for you? I mean, you mentioned more work-life balance, I suppose. But other than that, anything cool on the horizon?
I was almost in a PhD program to take my business school thesis and then my master's school thesis about using really search theory at a global scale to improve GDP. But the program got canceled because of the current government funding to certain programs. So I'm debating, do I still want to do a PhD? I'm 62, so you don't typically go back and get a PhD at 62. So that's one thinking, do I want to do that? Or I'm thinking of pivoting over to the government side and helping governments. I'm really about scuba diving and underwater photography, and I believe if we can tap into maybe affluent divers to come to certain parts of the world, we can help improve their GDP. That was actually part of I did a paper in grad school on how underwater photographers can improve the GDP of 3 countries. So that's what I'm thinking. I've been doing a lot of writing, a lot of ranting, as people call it. And I do want to mention, we first met. We didn't meet in person until Milan, but in 2009, we had an email exchange because you had a digital photography course.
Oh, wow. That's a long time ago.
And when I sold my agency for the second time, I wanted to retire and be an underwater photographer and be a blogger. and I was listing all kinds of courses for people to learn digital
Right.
photography. And I found an email where I said, "Hey, I want to list your course, digital photography." This was in 2009.
Yeah, I did.
We didn't talk since then, but
That's right. I didn't know about this. Incredible. And I mean, I didn't know it would show up in the US as well. But yeah, Hreflang maybe.
there we go. Yeah.
If there's any guest you would nominate to appear here on the podcast, who would that be?
I would say my former business partner, Jeremy Sanchez. He ran my agency once I left after we were acquired. He's doing some really brilliant things around agentic now, and then he, grew the business beyond what we did together. Entrepreneurial, he's a angel investor, so I think he'd be an interesting person to give both the business side and some of where the next generation of AI is going.
Nice. Please send me the contact. I'll reach out to him. Where can people find you? Where are the best channels?
Yeah, the best place to find me is on LinkedIn. I'm active there. I'm Bill Hunt 3 because there's actually a Bill Hunt 4, my son. So I'm active there. I'm not active on really on other social media. Signal and Friction is where I rant a lot. It really is my sort of rant fest. So that's you can Google Signal and Friction, and I put that out weekly. The other is my rant is at billhunt.com, and I have it there where yeah, it's called Rants and Raves. I talk about travel, I talk about business, things that I don't necessarily want tied to my professional persona. And then we also have a podcast called International Web Effectiveness, where we talk about things like we were talking here, how to make your website more effective, reducing friction and things like that with my co host, Bill Scully. Also, another great person to talk to. He's got an enterprise background and he's more the marketing tactics side. So, yeah, that's the places to reach me.
Fantastic. We'll link them down below. This was a great talk with Bill today. Me and Rocky learned more new things on also how to run a business and interesting insights on a multi-million-dollar companies. But I think the question on GEO versus SEO is still not settled. So we'll have to see what comes next with our guests. Thank you so much for being on the show. And I look forward to seeing you around, Bill. Bye bye.
Thanks for having me. Bye, Rocky.
It was a bit hectic.